is Rick Kitson. I'm with the Cupertino Chamber of Commerce, and this is our October 1st Legislative Action Committee.
Well, thank you. It's nice to see everybody. You know, as we have all grown accustomed to saying, it would be nicer to be present physically with one another. And I applaud you for your willingness and ability to stay engaged via Zoom. It's taken a toll on all of us, I know. I think what I would share with you is just a little bit of what's happening on 3 or 4 fronts, and then mention some engagement in Cupertino that is underway from our office in particular. You know, we're still having a conversation about COVID 18 months later. We just went through what has been described as the 4th surge. I think if we know anything by now, it's that there will be ups and downs, a bit of a roller coaster ride. I do think we benefit from the fact that after a year and a half, we know appreciably more about the nature of the virus and how the pandemic proceeds. And I will say the latest development that I'm sure you've all been hearing about, reading about, is the availability of booster shots for folks 65 and up. If you were a Pfizer recipient, and for a long list of folks under 65. And what I would say for those of you who are interested in booster shots is the list of things, the list of categories or the category of various conditions and circumstances that would make somebody eligible if they are under 65 is really quite wide ranging. So, you know, the thing I've discovered is that when there's a age-based criteria like 65 and above, we immediately hear from everybody under 65 who wants to know, what about us? And the short answer is take a look at the long list of other things that probably qualify you under some category or other to get a booster if you want one. And if you get struggle, please feel free to reach out to my office. We'll try and help steer you through that course. Right now, the boosters, I think most of you have read, is just for Pfizer folks. I do expect, our offices do expect, that sometime within the next few days to few weeks that there will be a similar announcement regarding the other vaccines, the Moderna and the J&J, the Johnson & Johnson vaccines. I think it is not clear whether there will be a general authorization for folks under 65, or whether you will need to look at one of these various categories. So if you're, if either you or somebody under the age of 65 is interested, anxious, I think it's a little bit different than in the past. When we first entered the pandemic, we all knew that folks at greater ages were going to be prioritized for risk reasons, and then we would march down to lower and lower age brackets. It is not clear to us that that is the case with the boosters. It may be that we hear about boosters for Moderna and J&J recipients, but that the age and the criteria don't change. And that's why I am putting as much emphasis on this long list of eligibility criteria for folks under 65. That's what I would encourage you to do. We will, as a county, continue to provide county sites for folks to get boosters. While that's a challenge for the county because it's been a long 18 months for all of us, I think the upside is that by offering boosters to folks who are, you know, beyond 6 months from their original vaccination, we have the ability to seek out a few more of the folks who have thus far been vaccine hesitant and push our numbers up. Right now, our numbers are really quite extraordinary, among the best in the nation. And I don't say that in a braggadocious way. I think we always can and should do more and do better. But, you know, we're at more than 83% of our county population, 12 and above, that has been fully vaccinated, more than 88% that's had at least one shot. Those are remarkable numbers compared to other parts of the state and the nation. So thank you to you all for the work you've done in communicating to friends, family, employees, residents about that. So short version, boosters, boosters, and boosters. Stay tuned on Moderna and J&J. And don't worry if you're under 65, there's probably a way to get there as we go forward. Second thing that is clearly of interest in and always the subject of conversation in Cupertino is activity at the Lehigh cement plant and quarry. This is the conversation that goes on, I think, at every meeting we ever have with one another, just sort of a status update. Here's what I can tell you. The folks at the cement plant and quarry put in an application for what I'll call an expansion of operations. The folks at the county, at the planning department, said, okay, the thing we need to do is take a look at what your vested rights permit you to do. The folks at the quarry said, no, we don't think you should do that. Folks at the planning department said, we think we should. The folks at the quarry sued the county, and the county just won that case. The case was dismissed, and with prejudice, meaning, no, we're done here. Let's not keep having this conversation. That's the end of that. So we will have something called a vested rights hearing sometime in the next couple of 2-3 months at the county, which is basically just a determination of, here's what you can do and where you can do it, consistent with the vested rights that you already have that were acknowledged by the board, probably a decade ago now. I really don't, quite frankly, understand why this was a kerfuffle. Sometimes you have differences of opinion, you end up in court, that's okay. In this case, I was like, well, you have vested rights, and at some point somebody's going to have to figure out what do those vested rights allow you to do and where. So why are we surprised by that? But as I say, ultimately it ended up in court. The court case is now resolved. That means we'll go ahead and have this thing called a vested rights hearing. And that is a precursor to actually hearing the application that has been submitted and is now complete for an expansion of activities at the quarry. So a little confusing, but try and keep the vested rights hearing separate from the application hearing and process. The application will be heard presumably after we get done with this vested rights hearing. One of the reasons I say presumably is because, as many of you will know, before an application can be processed, you need to do the EIR. And in order to do the EIR, you send somebody a bill and say, hi, here's what it's going to cost to do the EIR. You're the applicant, you get to pay. And thus far, Lehigh has said, we're not sending you a check for the EIR. Again, I'm a little perplexed just because you can't start the process until you have an EIR, and you can't start the EIR until somebody pays the fee. So after finally getting a completed application acknowledged and accepted, we're nonetheless sort of at a standstill until that funding comes in. If you were asking me to guess, and I want to look at all of you and say this is only my best guess / speculation, it may be that the folks at Lehigh simply want to wait until after the vested rights hearing so that they know what their vested rights are, and then say, okay, we are or are not prepared to move forward. Here's our check for the EIR if we are prepared to move forward. If someone from Lehigh is on the call, wants to share more, happy to hear that and let them share their point of view. But you will perhaps see and hear some buzz about activity because, as I say, we have a very substantial application. Plus, we have a vested rights hearing coming right up here in the next few months. And there's some activity there that has implications for the long-term future of both the quarry and the cement plant. I want to also mention, and this will seem a little counterintuitive perhaps, but I want to mention it by way of reassurance. You have perhaps read that we've had some conversations at our Board of Supervisors about the current county sheriff, including a vote of no confidence in the sheriff. That was a 5-0 vote on my motion. We also previously identified a number of issues that we thought deserved investigation by other governmental entities or agencies, including the Attorney General, the Department of Justice, the Fair Political Practices Commission, and the Civil Grand Jury. And we also indicated that some information should be released, which previously was privileged. That also passed on a 5-0. The reason I am sharing that with you is Cupertino, of course, relies on the Sheriff's Department for its law enforcement rather than having an independent police department. I do not want you to have any anxiety about the ability of the department to continue providing quality law enforcement for your community, my constituents. The issues with the sheriff were specific to the sheriff and her conduct. They are not related to the West Valley community law enforcement that you all rely on. Last thing I'll mention as a substantive matter is just, I suspect some of you know we're having some conversation about affordable housing in Cupertino. The site that is sometimes known as the Outback site was initially pursued by our Office of Supportive Housing as a place where we might use what are known as Measure A tax dollars to acquire and develop the site for affordable housing for folks at the very lowest end of the income spectrum. That has turned into a more intriguing conversation because there's another larger parcel over next to Valco that is an Apple property. And so now we are having two conversations at the same time. Too soon to tell how those will work out. And particularly with council members on the call, I don't want to get anybody in a Brown Act problem here, so we'll just let it go at that. But we're on the job on affordable housing, and we're trying to look at a range of possibilities. Last thing I'll say is just some of you know, but perhaps not all, my office and I have a tradition of doing what we call sidewalk office hours. I show up at farmers markets, and we have a card table and a sign, and we welcome all visitors. And I try to do these in cities throughout my district, including Cupertino. And we've got one coming up this Sunday at the Oaks. That's a new location for us. We were at the Miller Avenue Farmers Market, found that one was a little light on attendance. So we're just going to try the Oaks and see if that works better for my constituents and for our office in terms of making me and my staff available to people who want to ask questions, share opinions, or just ask me why the heck I voted a certain way on a particular item. Why don't I stop there? We love to do the farmers markets and the sidewalk office hours. We went 1.5 years without doing them and discovered when we started up again that there was some pent-up demand. So we did one round already, and now we're on the second round in the space of a couple of months, just because there appears to be great interest. I'm happy to hear from you all, and don't be shy. I enjoy the opportunity to hear from folks who have boots on the ground and know what's going on in the community.
Thank you, Supervisor Simitian. Any questions for Joe? You can raise your digital hand. You can throw it up on the chat. You can raise your real hand, your analog hand, and we'll call on you. So, Sean, were you raising your hand, or are you just adjusting your glasses? Great. All right. I'm not seeing any questions.
Rick, John Zarelli.
Okay, John Zarelli, you have the floor.
Yeah. Joe, the farmers market in Cupertino is across the street now at the senior center parking lot, not the Oaks. I mean, you'll see it when you get there, but it did switch locations.
All right, we'll get ourselves and hopefully our public to the right location, and I'll ask Brian just to make sure that once we have this nailed down, if we use the same venue again, that we have a clear language in our communications to members of the public. Thanks.
Great.
Sure.
And Supervisor, if you could have your staff copy us, we'll be sure to push that out right away. We're actually going to be sending out a newsletter later on, excuse me, later on today, and we're happy to include that.
Great. I'll ask Brian to give us a thumbs up or some indication that he heard that request. And Brian, I think the key phrase was today. Double thumbs up. Okay.
Yeah.
Key phrase was today. So let's get that information to Rick immediately, if not sooner,
Sure.
and clarify the location if that's necessary. Okay?
Right. Yeah, and
Thanks, Rick.
You're very welcome. Other questions for the supervisor? Yeah.
See, this would never happen if we were all together. You all would be lively and engaged.
Here we go. What do you got, Oren?
So some of the counties, as you know, are now changing because of the progress we've made, changing their indoor mask mandates. What's your view on when that may change for Santa Clara County?
Honest answer is I don't know. Follow up to I don't know is it has been an interesting year and a half in a system where these decisions get made by a professional appointed public official, our health director. You know, most of us are used to a system in which we go to our school board members or our city council members and say, here's what we think you should do, or our board of supervisors. And the law is very clear on this, much to, I think, the surprise of many, which is that these decisions get made by the public health officers, not by the elected officials, presumably because you want them to be based in sound public health practices and not be, quote, political, end quote. That being said, Oren, what I can share with you and everyone else is, I think our public health director, Dr. Sarah Cody, has increasingly come to be of the view that whether she agrees entirely or not with the direction from the state, that it will be easier for the public to comply if we don't have different rules and regulations at the county than the state has proffered at the state level. So I think what I can predict is less in the way of Santa Clara County specific direction, doesn't mean zero, but less, and more in the way of reliance on the California standards. So keep your eye on the state.
I have a separate comment, if I can, Rick, if nobody else is
Absolutely.
So Joe, my understanding is there's going to be tuning of the districts, right? Can you tell us about that process a little bit?
Sure. I'm going to tease Oren, if I may. Only a recovering elected official would care about this issue. The rest of you may or may not care. But just as following the decennial census, just as our congressional seats and our state legislative seats are redrawn to reflect population changes and the location of population, so too do we at the county go through that exercise. We have an advisory committee that's been impaneled, and ultimately, though, the decision rests with the Board of Supervisors, Oren, and I'm comfortable with that because for at least 3 of us on the 5-member board will be gone by the time these new lines take effect. So there's a very minimal issue of self-interest, which ordinarily would be a greater concern, frankly. What I will tell you is population shifts have changed a little between and among the 5 districts, and the goal is basically to draw 5 districts that have identical populations, or as close as we can get, and that keep what are known as communities of interest together. Now, the phrase communities of interest means different things to different people. In some instances, it means please make sure you don't split a city or a town. And the best example would be our friends in Montessorino, right? There are 3,500 people there. If you cut them in half, then their voice is down to being, you know, like 1,800 people in a district with 400,000. You can understand that they might not feel that they were being heard. It's a little more interesting and complex than that, I think, because for years, folks in Sunnyvale have said, well, we're not sure how we feel about being split. Sunnyvale is the one city other than San Jose that is split among the 15 cities and towns. And I've always been of the view, and I really feel this way and have observed it, Sunnyvale is very fortunate, frankly, because they are split and they have, Oren, you're right, they have 2 supervisors they can go to. And years ago, when folks would come to me from Sunnyvale, when I had maybe the smaller part, maybe a third, and Pete McHugh had the other 2/3, whenever they came to me, I'd always smile and say, "Let me guess, you've already been to Pete McHugh?" And he said, "No." And they'd laugh and say, "Yep, that's why we came to you. That's why it's good to have 2 supervisors." Now the 2 halves of Sunnyvale are more or less the same size. Maybe I have a little more, actually. But it's the only city other than San Jose that has 2 supervisors. And I always joke, the only people who seem to want to keep Sunnyvale whole, because it's 150,000 people, are Sunnyvale elected officials who would like to run for the Board of Supervisors one day and have the entire city be part of their base. So it's a purely political consideration that I'm talking about in that context. And I see Marissa is reminding us, yeah, the Foothill De Anza Community College District is undergoing districting as well. So, you know, not only do we have redistricting to contend with, but we have, in some jurisdictions, the creation of individual districts. We're already 5 different districts in the county, so that issue's been resolved long ago. But now it's about populations and keeping communities of interest together. And sometimes those aren't cities or towns. It could be a function of race and ethnicity, and making sure that we don't dilute the voices of people who are underrepresented in the process. Cupertino, to get back to the point here, is likely to stay whole in my estimation. Question is, whose district does it end up in? It has been part of what I call the North County West Valley District 5 that I represent for a good long time now. And I would be surprised if that changed, but it could. But I think the chances of Cupertino being split are very, very small indeed. You may or may not know that, you know, Cupertino, for example, is split in the state assembly with a small piece that is in one district, when the bulk of folks in Cupertino think of themselves as being in this district. Well, yeah, except for these folks. So, as I say, a little bit wonky. The most important thing is to make sure that Cupertino's voice never gets fractured or diluted in a way that reduces your ability to get heard in what is a big and diverse county. So I'll let it go at that. And I'm mindful of that for all of the smaller communities, because I represent the smaller communities and always have done.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Lisa Warren, you've been patient. You have a question.
Lisa, that was Rick's way of saying I gave a long-winded answer. So you have been patient. Go ahead.
Oh, that hurts.
Okay, Joe. So here, Joe, I'm going to go back to the beginning of your long-winded answer to that last question.
Yes.
Just FYI, I'm just a resident, and I do care. You said most people don't care, and I know others that do when any boundaries are changed.
Lisa, tell us why.
Huh?
Tell us why. I'm curious.
Well, I think there's various reasons, some of which I probably don't want to share.
Okay.
And I do think keeping communities with common interests together is important, but those communities themselves change, so it can be a tricky thing.
Yeah, I mean, as an example, Lisa, and I'm guessing you know this based on your interest in the topic, you know, my colleague, Mr. Wasserman, who will be gone in a year and a half, represents a district that right now has Los Gatos in the same district with Gilroy, in the same district with a large portion of San Jose. I think I would say those are sort of 3 very different views of the world. And, you know, sometimes I'll have folks in the West Valley portion of my district say, well, Cupertino and Saratoga, they're different than Mountain View and Palo Alto, to which I would say, yes, but all of our cities and towns are different. I would argue each is unique, and a district supervisor needs to understand and respect that. But I think in the northwest corner of the county, you know, on housing issues or transportation issues, we probably have a little bit more in the way of common interests, again, than, say, Milpitas or Gilroy, just by virtue of our geography. Do you have a take on that?
I agree. But it's also good to have a little difference, because we don't want to be stagnant, but
Yeah, and I
frankly, we all need 5 of you to be able to talk to.
Well, that's right. And I've struggled with this in my career because by virtue of just my location in Palo Alto and when I was in the state legislature and in the Board of Supervisors, over the years, I have represented 21 different cities and towns, Lisa. And whereas I've got colleagues who have represented a chunk of San Jose, and that's what they've represented. You know, Supervisor Chavez, for example, who's now running for mayor, has represented a supervisorial district that was wholly contained in San Jose. And obviously, when she was on the San Jose City Council, that's what she represented. So she has probably 16 years in elected office representing only San Jose. By virtue of my location and the districts I've represented, as I say, I've represented everything from Belmont in the north and Foster City to Capitola in Santa Cruz County to Half Moon Bay over on the coast side to Cupertino. I mean, at the risk of stating the obvious, Foster City is not the same as Half Moon Bay, is not the same as Cupertino, is not the same as Capitola. So, you know, it's one of the reasons why, and I see Kitty and Hung Wei on the call. It's one of the reasons why I have to rely and try very hard to rely on local council members and school board members to keep me in the loop about what's going on in their communities. Because, you know, if you represent 8 different cities as I do now, that's incredibly important. It's also one of the reasons why I do sidewalk office hours and spread them around throughout the district, because, you know, in Cupertino, I hear about Lehigh cement plant and quarry. In Palo Alto, it never comes up. You know, in Mountain View, I hear about airplane noise in a way that is different than what I hear in Saratoga. It's a different set. So while there are lots of things that are common concerns or that bind us together, if you aren't moving around and listening to folks in these different communities, you're not there. And to your point, Lisa, having said that, you know, my obligation is to do the right thing for everybody in the county when I cast a vote. So I can't act like, well, just because it's happening in a city I don't represent, I don't have any obligation to do my homework and exercise good judgment. I have to balance those two. And that was certainly the case in COVID, because we knew that East San Jose and Gilroy were not getting the level of vaccinations that we wanted them to have. So I had to be a district advocate to push for services in my district to serve you all. And on the same token, acknowledge, understand, and support efforts to make sure we were getting the vaccine out to folks in East San Jose and Gilroy who've never heard of Joe Simitian, Simitian, or whatever his name is.
Thank you for that. And by the way, you asked, I saw you at your last Sunnyvale farmers market visit, and you did ask me a question about Lehigh, knowing I was from Cupertino. So I don't think I gave you a satisfactory answer. Well, I gave you a very brief answer. But yeah, you mentioned that at the time too. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Other questions for Supervisor Simitian? Seeing none.
Rick, I just wanted to thank Supervisor Simitian for being here with us this afternoon, and I'm hoping you got on your calendar the Diwali Festival on October 16th.
Actually, I do not, unfortunately, and I know this is a disappointment to both you and me, because I have a family wedding in Toronto that same day. Otherwise, I would be there. But I am, and I know this is cold comfort, I am trying to calendar the Diwali celebrations in Sunnyvale, where the community was kind enough to invite me. So hopefully I'll get a chance to participate in one venue if I can't do it in both. Okay.
Oh, that's nice. Well, you have a great time in Toronto. Maybe somebody from your office can come and represent you.
Good idea. Brian, would you make sure we follow up on that so that we're not MIA?
Great. Well, finishing up on the districting and redistricting conversation, I think Monday there is a meeting for Foothill De Anza. Marissa, when and where is that meeting?
It is actually at the district office. It's their first in-person meeting since the pandemic began. So it's this Monday, October 4th at 6 p.m. The district office.
And you included the link for that, so great.
And why don't I ask Brian to get you information about the next couple of meetings for the county's committee, and that way, if you'd like, you can share it with your folks who care about redistricting issues, so they know how to engage if they wish to at the county level.
Great, thank you. For some people, they may remember that at one time, Rancho Rinconada was part of a different supervisorial district and frankly, it's been wonderful to have one supervisor. It's very nice. So to the extent that we can maintain that community of interest, that would be very good. But having been through this process, it is incredibly difficult. So I know everyone will work very hard to make it work well. Great.
All right, thanks a million. Appreciate you including my office and me in your meetings, and do let us know. Feel free to reach out if there's some way we can be helpful.
Thank you so much, Supervisor. Great. Now, we did have a couple of people come in later in the meeting. Kitty Moore was here. She came in. Thank you, Brian.
If you all need me, you know where to find me, or just ask Rick. He has my email address.
Okay.
So.
And I'll look for that. Just a couple of lines about your office hours.
Yeah, I will forward that to you today.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Kitty, we had done introductions. I think Kitty Moore came on later. Anjali spoke. We know her, and I think Sandy won. Is that Sandy James?
Yes, that's Sandy James. Sorry about that.
No, not at all. We just want to make sure everyone knows who's here.
Hi, Rick. It's Kitty.
Oh, hi, Kitty.
Yes, I'm happy to be here and really enjoyed listening to Supervisor Simitian. Great update. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It's always a pleasure to have him. Now, the next item on our agenda is SB 1383. Is that correct, Ursula? Yeah. Why don't you fill us in on that? This is some new state legislation targeting the reduction in organic food waste, which really is just a fancy way of stopping us from throwing away as much food as we do.
Indeed. Yeah, thank you for that and for letting me come speak to you today. So I introduced myself earlier, but I am Ursula. I'm the Environmental Programs Manager for Cupertino, and thank you for this time today to talk about 1383 and what it means for our businesses here in Cupertino. My slides should take about 10 minutes to present. And hopefully you're seeing them. I'm sure Rick would yell at me if not. Okay. So SB 1383 is the California Short-Lived Climate Pollutant Reduction Strategy, and it is tackling two main problems. One, a lot of organic materials, including edible food, are ending up in the landfill. Meanwhile, there are a lot of food insecure people. This slide from CalRecycle is showing that over half of the material being disposed of is organics, including 18% food, much of which was still edible at the time of disposal. So the state found that over half was disposed as organics, but what about here in Cupertino? And yes, even here in Cupertino, we found that about half of what is going into the gray carts and bins bound for landfill is compostable organic material. The first circle you see on the left shows what is in the commercial garbage stream, 48% of which is compostable materials. So you might say, okay, commercial, sure, we can imagine that, but what about residents in apartments and single family dwellings? Yes, even in the residential sector, garbage stream, we see about half of organics by weight, both multifamily and single family. How can we really know that we're throwing away so much organic material, including food? We checked. In 2018 and 2019, we hired Cascadia to perform waste characterizations, which entailed pulling samples, sorting, and weighing by a multitude of different categories. So these are just some photos to show you what that process looks like. For commercial, they're basically taking a giant sort of scoop out of a truckload and then doing all the sorting and weighing. And for single family, it looked more like this. The routes were selected at random, samples were anonymized, and just a quick shout out to Cascadia for these images. They are very experienced at this, and they provide results with a 90% confidence level, so they are very well versed in sorting the trash. So now that we've established that we really are throwing away a lot of organics to landfill, why is this so critical to work on? Well, the conditions in the landfills cause the organics to generate methane. In fact, landfills are the third largest producer of methane in the state. And methane is a climate super pollutant, at least 72 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And that contributes to climate change. The other piece was already mentioned earlier, the crazy fact of throwing away edible food when not everyone has enough to eat in the state. The goals of 1383 are statewide, and there are specific and prescriptive requirements for jurisdictions, haulers, and businesses that are designed to meet them. Statewide, the goals are to reduce the disposal of organic waste 75% by 2025 and increase edible food recovery 20% by 2025. While 1383 has requirements for residents, businesses, the city itself, waste haulers, waste management processing facilities, today I'm going to focus mainly on what 1383 requires of businesses operating here in Cupertino. For any of our council members in the audience, this presentation will look quite different at the council meeting next week. Here are some basic requirements for businesses to be compliant. Nearly all businesses will need to subscribe to and use a green cart or bin to separate out food scraps and other organic materials like food soiled paper if they aren't already. This requirement essentially ratchets down the earlier mandatory commercial organics regulations that are already in effect. Businesses also need to make containers available for sorting, both to workers and customers, educate employees and tenants, and allow us access to check on how sorting is going. And by us, I mean both city and Recology staff, because we will be working on this together. There are some allowable exemptions. For instance, you don't need the front of house bins for a particular stream if you are not generating that targeted material. A business might also be exempt if only minimal amounts of organics are generated, and the city and Recology staff would do a site visit to confirm those situations. The numbers shown here are the thresholds for de minimis waivers, what I just was talking about. So if your total amount of solid waste subscribed service, which includes all your 3 streams, garbage, recycling, organics, is more than 2 cubic yards per week, but you are generating less than 20 gallons per week of organic materials, you could request a waiver. For a few businesses in Cupertino, edible food recovery is going to be a big new requirement. To be compliant, those businesses will need to show that they are recovering the maximum amount of edible food that would otherwise be disposed. Excess edible food can be given to staff or recovered via a contract with a food recovery organization, but it cannot go into the trash or the organics bin if it is fit to be recovered and eaten. Also, there are record-keeping requirements for the food generators and the food recovery organizations to gather information that must be reported back to the city. The food recovery requirements are only for those large commercial generators of surplus edible food, not residents. Looking back to our Cupertino waste characterization, there was a category for potentially donatable food. Obviously, you can imagine when they're doing the characterization, they can't tell, was it really still in good shape when you put it in the trash, but they can get an idea, like if there's a closed package that hasn't been opened and it was chucked in the trash, maybe that could have still been okay, those kind of materials. And it was estimated that 180 tons per year of edible food may be going into the garbage in Cupertino. Of course, that was before the pandemic, so the numbers might look a bit different, but it's likely to still be similar in terms of practice. Businesses subject to these food recovery requirements are broken into 2 tiers by the state. to reflect the size and amount of potential food to be recovered. All the tier 1 businesses in Cupertino have already been contacted directly by staff working together with joint venture Silicon Valley under contract with the county. Santa Clara County jurisdictions are working together on this food recovery piece because food generation, surplus generation, recovery, and distribution happens across the region without regard to jurisdiction. And a unified effort will help everyone comply. You can imagine being Safeway, for instance, and how a unified approach would be helpful. So you're not trying to do something different in every city. The various jurisdictions will likely establish an MOU for this work, solidifying this regional approach. Outreach to tier 2 generators will begin next year for compliance with food recovery requirements starting in 2024. Businesses that are not a tier 1 or 2 business do not need to worry about this, but we are very proud to be supporting this regional effort through the County of Santa Clara that is providing all these great resources, information, and support for both the edible food generator businesses and the food recovery organizations, including navigating the data collection and record keeping requirements. Again, if you're a tier 1 business, you've already been contacted, but if anyone is interested to learn more about this, all the info is at sccfoodrecovery.org. The edible food recovery and donation piece may be new, but Cupertino businesses producing certain volumes of waste have been required to put food scraps and other organics into the green bins and carts since 2015. And residents have been able to add food scraps to their yard trimmings cart since 2010. And then our local mandatory organics ordinance even phased in apartment complexes in 2018, which is something that is only now being required by the state under 1383. This is a photo of what we consider a great looking cart at the Hamptons from 2018. There are many jurisdictions out there that have not had organic service at apartment complex, so they're having to roll out completely new routes with their hauler. Other cities have not been able to accept food scraps in their residential yard waste carts and are having to make those arrangements. Some cities don't have carts that are the right colors, so they'll be having to plan for that transition. All things considered, Cupertino is in pretty good shape. Also, as you likely remember, we just adopted a new franchise agreement with Recology at the end of last year, which was the perfect timing to capture required pieces of 1383, such as route audits and capacity for the increased collected organics. Across the board, we need to do better at sorting, and many more businesses will need to get the subscribed service or be considered for exemptions, but we have a lot going for us. The regulations require that we enforce with penalties beginning in 2024. So the first 2 years are going to be focused on getting businesses set up with the service they need or evaluate them for exemptions, as well as providing technical support and education. We can, for instance, provide a green bin for use inside to collect food scraps if a business needs one to get going. We have these large trilingual decals to go with bins. We'll also be working on additional outreach pieces targeting the different customer groups, and the county level folks will also be developing outreach materials for all the jurisdictions to use. Our next steps are to continue letting businesses know about the requirements of 1383 through various targeted outreach methods. We have set up a web page that has a snazzy accordion feature to show all the requirements by type of customer. So you can find this page by going to cupertino.org/no waste and look for that 1383 page in the menu. And then if you find the organics collection for businesses, you can click on that little sideways caret and see all the various requirements pop out. Council will consider the ordinance language next Tuesday, our proposed language, to reflect all these requirements. So next Tuesday, October 5th. With a goal of having it be effective by January 1st, 2022 as required. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. You can also feel free to contact me directly if you think of something. And if it's helpful, here's a QR code if you want to zip directly to that 1383 webpage. So I can just leave that up here for a couple extra seconds. And then this is, since it's October, I thought I'd show my favorite shot of a residential yard waste cart with a little jack-o'-lantern in there. So
I have a question about our church does gleaning, and they go to some of the food stores and collect all of the the vegetables and fruits and things that would be ordinarily thrown away and they put into boxes and use for to feed the poor. So is that program, would that help your recycling? Wouldn't that be a good thing to do if they because there are churches that really have a hard time collecting those things. They go around and sometimes they have and sometimes they don't. But I think it would be really good. It's usable food. They have to throw it away. I think the businesses have to throw things away after a certain, especially the fruits and vegetables and there. So, and that would it would save a lot if they did participate. Maybe they should be encouraged to participate in a church gleaning where they're helping. It's going to our West Valley services, community services is where they go and then deliver it to the different families. Some of that food. It's really good. It's really good if you get it right.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. It doesn't sound like covered activities under these regulations, but certainly supports the overall goals. And we're happy to help support that.
Yeah, if you could encourage it, if they could get credit for that, if they donated, 50 pounds of vegetables and things, they really do clean it out when they get their new deliveries in, and that's where they go. I know people who do gleaning. And it's not just the church, that several churches are working and they go to West Valley and bring it to them. So I know this goes on, and it seems like it would be a perfect program to get that organic material out of our waste. In other words, you don't want us to throw away food, or you don't want businesses to throw away food in where we've been. I was going to say brown, but now it's a green bin.
Right. So if there's an organization like a church or other food recovery organization that's been going to, say, a supermarket or a large generator and getting that over to a donation situation, that activity will be captured under the food recovery piece that the county is organizing. And they've been doing a lot of great work around the large food recovery organizations down to little tiny ones. So they should be captured in that, I would imagine.
Thank you. Lisa Warren, you had your hand up.
I do. So I know that and I know it's not in this particular bill, but if there's a way to involve the teen commission and to educate students and ask schools to participate in this, because there is so much food waste at schools. Kids, parents buy them school lunches, they pick them up, they throw them directly in the garbage. There's meals, there's fruits of all kinds that just get, instead of saying, oh, I don't want that apple, they just take it and throw it away. And I know this to be a fact. So it's a huge waste of food, huge. And including people who provide their students with home cooked meals and bring them, deliver to them at lunchtime. And kids either don't come pick them up from the office, or they pick them up and they throw them away so they can bring home the empty containers. It's really, really awful. And I don't know if there's anything that the city can do to have a conversation with the school districts or the schools within the east.
Yeah, schools are interesting, and I definitely know firsthand, the sort of the tragedy of food waste at schools. And there are a lot of reasons. Sometimes the kids are required to take certain elements under the food, rules and whatnot. There's a whole interesting set of rules around that. But under 1383 schools, the city does not have to enforce on the schools, but we are going to be required to help educate them. So the school's enforcement piece will be handled by the state, is what they've said. But we definitely do want to partner, as you say, because there is so much opportunity there. So we'll definitely be working with the schools to see what we can do. I know they have the service and they subscribe separately with Recology. So, we will definitely work to reach out to them. And John might have more to add to that. I don't know, but yeah, they're definitely on the radar, and we know it's a problem there.
Well, I think the teen commission could be of use in doing that, and even school newspapers, get their reporters out to talk about it, because kids do read those papers, I believe, or parents will if they get it brought home. If they realize how bad it is, maybe they'll stop bringing food that's going to be thrown away. Anyway.
Yeah, I like that idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Other questions about this? It sounds like the city's already been in contact with the Tier 1 category, which is good because 2022 is 3 months away.
Yes. And I will say they only finalized the regs in, I think, November 2020. So we all sort of knew what was going to be involved, but we didn't really know what was really going to be in there until really not that long ago. So all the cities are madly working on this.
Super, super.
And obviously there's a lot more to it than just this focus. So I tried to narrow it down for you.
No, that's right. Now you had talked about businesses, different types of organizations needing these green bins. And do you have any idea how many of, say, the Tier 1 organizations, what percentage currently have those bins, the green bins?
Yeah, under our current ordinance, which is mandatory commercial organics, it's already everybody with greater than 2 cubic yards of service per week has to have a green bin and be using it. So we're already hitting all the large producers.
So for that stage of implementation, that looks fine. It's, I expect in the next tier that's going to be more of an issue.
Yeah, as it expands to everybody, unless you meet some de minimis exemption, that's where the work is going to be. And, you get little offices and they're sharing a bin with another little office. And so, we're going to have to go visit and determine each of these. And some may need service and some may come out exempt.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
But we definitely have all the larger producers already on a route with service.
Well, it seems like this is going to be an ongoing conversation. So thank you. This is important work. In preparing for this meeting, I shared with Ursula something I read on a different in a different publication. About 40% of all food produced in the U.S. is thrown away.
Yep. I double checked that because I was like, I've seen that too.
And yeah, I've seen, which is, if you think about it, really astonishing. So this really is a incredible. We can make our food production more efficient. And,
right. And I think that goes from farm all the way to end user, right? So it's not just like we're throwing away so much, but it's the whole life cycle. This organization, Save the Food, has a great short video called The Life of a Strawberry. And it shows like the strawberry growing up on the farm, going through, falling in love with a lime, and having a whole life and then getting chucked uneaten, at the end. And it just sort of brings home that piece.
Great. Well, questions for Ursula? Not seeing any. Thank you, Ursula.
You're very welcome. And of course, feel free to ask if something occurs to you later.
We know where you work. Great. Thank you. John, over to you. Anything happening at the city?
I do have the development activity report up, but there's only one change from last month, so I'll spare you the small type. As you might or might not be aware, September 21st, Council directed this staff to start the housing element process. They also approved the contract with our housing consultant, EMC, to start the housing element, to be our partner and consultant for the housing element process. This Tuesday, October 5th, the council will have the study session on the housing element. And at that meeting, EMC will make a presentation as well as staff. And so the main points we talk about the process, and also solicit any comments from council or the public at large about questions they might have or direction they want to give.
Okay. Great. Questions for John about developments in the community at City Hall? I don't see any hands. Now, it's worth mentioning at this meeting on a different topic that John has been filling in for Angela Sway, who left the city, stopped working for the city back in June or end of the last fiscal year. And so we have a new person coming on board. Is that correct, John?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and Tina Kapoor, do I have that right? Okay. Yeah, so we look forward to having a new staff. John has stepped in rather nicely. I think we'll still be seeing him, but there will look forward also to a new face and seeing Tina, who comes. If you just Google her, you'll find she's been a very, very busy person. And I think will be a wonderful addition to Cupertino. Great. That's all we have for our agenda. Are there any announcements, activities, events that people want to share? I think Donna is probably on her way up to Piketty tonight for the Historical Society fundraiser that's happening this evening. Anjali, I think the Chamber has some events as well, right?
Yeah. Go ahead. We have our annual Diwali event on the 16th in 2 weeks and hoping to see all of you there. It's our second event for the year. We had the first outdoor event on just this past Saturday, and I think it was a great outcome. We were, I think Sean was there, so if he wants to share his feedback.
Yeah, sure. It was an amazing event, and it was a really great turnout. We were really pleased to see so many vendors out there, and especially all the Cupertino community coming out and enjoying the day. It was really festive and very creative. We had some great treats and unique items there, and I think Anjali and Rick and them have posted on the Facebook, as well as possibly some other, Rick, you can tell what other media as we posted all the photos, but you'll get a chance to see all the wonderful things that were done. And look forward to next year. So, and of course, the next event. So, see you soon.
Yeah, we have in our survey of the night market, we found that we're in an interesting cusp where we had a good turnout. The vendors were very anxious. For some, it was the first live event they had done since the beginning of the pandemic. They did very well. For attendees, there was a certain amount of frustration because they wanted more. So vendors are afraid to come out because they don't know if anyone's going to show up. And the public is really starting to show up and have higher expectations that things are going to be back to normal. So we're certainly we're optimistically looking forward to make our way through this transition.
I just want to add something to that, Rick. I want to do a shout out to Marissa and De Anza College for hosting it with us, because we couldn't have done this incredible event without their support. So it was really good. First time doing something on the campus. It was wonderful.
Yeah, very wonderful venue, nice college, one of my many alma maters. But the De Anza staff were there throughout, and we were also very pleased to have President Lloyd Holmes come by. Very nice event. We also have on the 28th, 2 weeks after Diwali, a little less than, there's also another wine stroll back for a popular demand. So look for that October 28th at Main Street. Marissa, did you want to add anything?
No, just that the night market was, I think, a great partnership and a good collaboration, and we're pleased to have done that with the chamber.
It was I think it was new for everybody, but very exciting opportunity. Look forward to working with Deanza much more in the future. Other events, announcements? Oren, anything going on with Rotary? Oh,
you're muted.
Should I touch my mouth with that? I don't.
We need you to unmute and then say it again.
There you go.
Nothing for a while. We're actually going to, we're just starting to solicit for beneficiaries for our golf tournament. Every year we look for a major beneficiary to get up to $25,000 as a part of the golf tournament. So we'll be, if you've got an organization that qualifies, let us know. And we're just starting that process. But we've got our crab feed, which is scaled down, COVID scaled down tomorrow. But that's all, it's all in the bag now as far as, you had to buy your tickets, earlier this week and everything. So we're waiting for the spring. The library, just to report out on that, since I'm involved in that as well, had a very nice event last night. You may know there's an addition going on in the library for some meeting rooms. It's well underway. The city is funding most of it, but they have solicited individual donors, and there's a donor wall where you can buy a block and larger donors. And one of whom I don't know if they want to announce it, is supporting us in a big way. Somebody on the call here, and had a nice little event yesterday about that as well. So great turnout. The library is the unmitigated gem, if you will, in Cupertino that everybody supports, and it's great to see that support continue.
Yeah, that's it's an amazing organization. The support from the community and the city has really, it's really a shining star amongst all of our local institutions. Other events or announcements? Seeing none. That's it. Last call. Well, that's it. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend. Enjoy, and we'll see you around town.
You well, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.